Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are wrapping up our deep dive of A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas with this episode 11 covering chapters 75 through 82. As always, let's start with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on this stretch of chapters and ACOWAR as a whole, although this is the end of ACOWAR here, these episodes do include spoilers for the entire ACOTAR series. These deep dives do not, however, have spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of every episode, where we include our Maasverse Madness segment. We'll give a big spoiler warning beforehand, so you can leave the episode if you have not read the rest of the Maasverse, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /or Crescent City callouts.
Did you hear that? We have spoilers. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So if you don't know that Reese dies, then please go finish the books. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we of Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Feyre finally gets her red lacy under things. Thank God that plot line really it needed to come to a full circle. If you cannot tell, please do be mindful of those little listening ears today.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events.
We cannot wait for our Fantasy Fangirls live show at Comedy Works South in Denver, Colorado on October 20th. The topic is going to be our biggest questions and predictions leading up to Onyx Storm. General admission tickets are still available, but VIP sold out fast.
We'll also be influencer partners at the Swords and Shadows Masquerade by Mountains of Magic in Highlands Ranch, Colorado on November 23rd.
You can also dance the night away with us at the Fantastique New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
And we have so much in store as podcast partners at Romantasy BookCon in Los Angeles on February 20th through 22nd in 2025.
Links to get more information and tickets to all of these events are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which is about to finally make sense after 3 whole books, which includes our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, book club, promo codes for live events, plus a 20% off discount and link to the merch store. That is $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is for $10 a month. And then we have our newest and highly requested tier, the Inner Circle, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus lots more behind the scenes content, a welcome gift from Lexi and I, giveaways, a private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast, and that is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes, and really and truly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now, it is time to save the world.
As always, Nicole's going to kick off our episode by summarizing what happens in ACOWAR chapters 75 through 82, aka the end of this book. So gather around, friends. We need an Inner Circle debrief.
Chapter 75. We are right back into action with Elaine just having stabbed the King of Hybern. But he's not finished off yet. Nesta severs his head and holds it as her souvenir. But despite the number 1 asswipe being taken off the board, the battle rages on. The Cauldron decides that Feyre's mental adventure has come to a close, and it zooms across the battlefield, back to being face to face with deceiver Amren. But wait, what's this? The tiny ancient one has had a plan to end the war all along? Unbind her from her Fae body, to which Varian says, no! And is ignored. Amren flings herself into the cauldron and Feyre speaks Bob's spell. And emerging from the giant cookware is a fiery angel demon who sweeps across the battlefield, killing everything in its path, officially ending the war. Chapter 76. We're saved! We're saved! Saved! But uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem. The cauldron is a void and broken into 3 pieces. Turns out that's bad and is the end of the world as we know it. However, walking in, Reese has a sneaky plan. He's going to sacrifice himself. No, you can't! There must be another way! me! Do you want the cauldron to destroy the world or not? Feyre, you have to be the conduit. I know it. Not me, not your sisters, you.
I'm so glad I muted myself because I was just laughing so hard. Bravo.
Thank you. And I literally wrote in the outline, I was like, he's going to sacrifice himself. And I was like, wait a second. Anyway, JK, he doesn't tell her any of that as he pours his power into her and the cauldron. And it's fixed. Dang, that warranty must be really good. But something's missing. The mating bond. Because Rhys is dead. Dun, 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 chapter 77. No, not our shadow daddy. But wait, we have all 7 High Lords / the High Lady. One at a time, each High Lord gives their light seeds into Rhys's body. Nice. And only after a distraught Feyre shares her entire story to Rhys does his heart come back to life. So it's like 64 hours later. But he lives! And he's not the only one. Like a rabbit coming out of a top hat, a just high Fae now, Amren, emerges from the cauldron. The family is back together. Chapter 78. Well, almost. It's time to bury Papa Archeron. And Nesta's notably acting a little funny. But don't worry, we'll have an entire book about it. After the burial, Lucien joins the sisters and he's got one hell of a story to tell. Where's the best place to tell that story? Oh, hey, Lucien, do you want to come live with us in Velaris? Enjoy it while it lasts, Lucien, because that's basically the last time your mate will ever talk to you. Feyre makes her way back to the tent, but it looks like there's a few extra people in with her. You were just dead mate, Miriam and Draken. Chapter 79. A quick chat ensues with Miriam and Draken where they all agree to take the cauldron to Cretea, so no one will try to get their paws on it. The next day, it's time for a High Lords meeting round 2 with some extra delegates. It is time to discuss renegotiating the treaty. Chapter 80. Well, it was a long meeting and nothing got resolved, but we'll save that for another day because they want to go home. Back in Velaris, Cassian wastes no time before he breaks out the fancy liquor. Dude, your priorities are great. Feyre has one quick note to write. Dear Tamlin, fuck you and everything you stand for. Just kidding. I hope you live a happy life. Not said, far, far away from me. Chapter 81. Who's that boy? It's Rhys. It's Rhys's POV, and he looks upon his alive and happy family who are hanging out in, yep, you guessed it, the dining room. Rhys takes a moment with his brothers to ensure that this is all real and to make them verbally sign a contract that they will not do another war for 500 years. Chapter 82. Back to Feyre. Later on the roof, she slides into her mate's arms, and only when his hands start to roam does he notice something. The red lacy lingerie set has made a comeback, my friends! But let's talk about death. Never wanting to witness their other half leave the world again, they make a bargain together. If you die, I die. What could go wrong? Rhys scoops Feyre into his arms, and these two love bats fly together side by side into the sunset. It is a gift. All of it. End of book 3.
And the people of Velaris wave up to them like the people in the office. I'll never not see that.
It's perfect.
Oh, man. Well, you know what, Nicole? I think I know what the liquid inside the cauldron actually is. It's LMNT.
Wait, you're so right. Honestly, sometimes it feels like LMNT truly does have life-giving properties, just like the cauldron. LMNT is an electrolyte solution that has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing at your best.
It has 0 sugar, artificial flavors, or other dodgy ingredients to hold you back, yet it still packs in the flavor. I absolutely love how many flavors there are to choose from with LMNT. A few of my personal favorites are watermelon salt, raspberry salt, orange salt. I've also been loving citrus salt lately. Of course, there's also mango chili. Seriously, though, I could list all of them as my favorites, and I'll just stop right here because I'm just going to keep listing off their flavors because there's so many.
I'm currently drinking the LMNT sparkling watermelon salt. It's helping me through this last stretch of ACOWAR. LMNT came up with a fantastic offer for our listeners. Get your free sample pack with any LMNT purchase at drinklmnt.com/FFG. And be sure to try the new LMNT Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water that is perfect for on the go or for a 6-hour recording session.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. We are in the home stretch of the battle and a whole lot of chaos is still going on. The king is dead, killed by Elaine and Nesta. Huzzah! But no one on the battlefield seems to notice. As Fae-vorite and the Cauldron spirits zoom back to the hilltop, Rhys and the other High Lords have unleashed themselves to their beast forms, with enemy soldiers dying in their wake. Rhys is faltering, though. He's in pain, and his mate recognizes that he needs help. But too bad, she's still zooming. Helion is still battling the Hybern commander we saw approach him earlier, and it's not looking good for our High Lord of the Day court. This Hybern commander seems pretty confident he's about to best Helion Spellcleaver. Oh no! Bryaxis is still fighting, holding the line for Grayson's men and guarding these mortals. I love that little detail, how Bryaxis defends those who need defending the most. It's honestly not unlike how it takes up residence in the priestess's library. But anyway, Draken and Miriam are fiercely fighting Jurian. Hangar! Do! But Fae-vorite isn't able to tell if Jurian is fighting back or trying to fend them off while he tries to explain themselves. I swear I'm on your side! I can absolutely imagine that scene in my head, or you can just watch YouTube and watch me act it out right then.
All I can say is in this moment, like as I was reading this, I was like, is this really the right time? Like Miriam and Draken are two very skilled fighters. We could use you guys on the battlefield actually fighting. Point. You know who could probably use their help? Fucking Helion Spellcleaver right now.
To be fair, they do think that Jurian is a bad guy. So they think that they are fighting essentially an equivalent of a Hybern commander. But you make a very good point.
I thought Rhys told them. Like, no.
He did. And I'm assuming that more soon enough will interject and be like, you all stop.
This is not the time.
Bottom line, even with the king dead, even without the Cauldron, even with all the courts united, plus the humans from the mortal realm, Cretea, and the continent, plus Draken's highly trained large aerial legion, it's still not enough against this Hybern army, and our side is getting overwhelmed. It's not just about being outnumbered, which I don't know if they still are at this point. The numbers aren't math in here, but whatever. It's about Hybern's determination and dedication to their cause. Remember that the king has spent the last 500 years encouraging his people to truly believe that they have been wronged and forgotten. Hybern's army isn't here fighting just for their king. They are fighting for their freedom, for their way of life. They are united in their mission to take back what is theirs, what they feel they are entitled to and deserve. And they are fighting with fervor and centuries of hatred. But finally, quote, the Cauldron sucked back into itself, and I was again atop that rock. Feyre's conscious and her bit of soul entrapped with the Cauldron is now reunited with her body, and she can feel Amren slapping her and saying, pull yourself together! Amren knew that Feyre on her own could serve as the conduit for the Cauldron because she has looked into the Ouroboros mirror and faced her whole self. We talked about that so much last episode. She essentially has the unique power of self-identity that no one else in this world has, which is why she can hold on to herself and not get completely lost in the magic of the Cauldron like she almost did at the end of ACOWAR. But Feyre slipped, and the Cauldron still took her with it on its hunt for Nesta, although she was still able to hold onto her conscious and sense of self during that period. Amren here is reminding her not to get lost in the Cauldron's power, to fight it, to hold onto herself fully like they planned and like she should be able to do. And yep, she's back within her body, still holding onto the Cauldron, but the Cauldron has settled into itself and she back within herself, her own entity.
But let's not forget that right before the Cauldron took Feyre on a nice little joyride, Amren lied, and Feyre is still really pissed about it, threatening to kill Amren for this deception. While maybe a little extreme without an explanation from Amren's side, from Feyre's POV, it does look like Amren has been on Hybern's side all along and took the opportunity to now take the High Lady off the playing field. But no, we know that's not the case. Because remember a few episodes back when Feyre received the message from the Suriel to pass along to Amren, quote, tell the silver-eyed messenger that the answer lies on the second and penultimate pages of the book. Together they hold the key. The key found in Bob is the answer not to a spell to control Hybern, as Amren says at the end of chapter 66. It is actually an unbinding spell for Amren to unbind her from her Fae body that she has been trapped in for 5,000-ish years.
Oh, don't get me started on this. I have gone down that rabbit hole.
For thousands of years.
Yes.
And instead, it returns her to her original horrifying form. More on this in a moment. Originally, Amren thought that she would need all three Archeron sisters to act as conduits. That way, no one is drained fully of power and thus dies, much like what almost happened to Feyre back at the end of ACOWAR. But after learning that Feyre faced the Ouroboros mirror and lived to tell the tale, something that no one in the Age of Prythian has ever been able to do, except, I guess, maybe the original owner, the Weaver, but I don't know if we can exactly call her sane.
I don't think she counts, yeah.
I don't think she counts. So because of Feyre's power over her own mind, she will be able to stay centered in the real world while being the sole conduit for unbinding Amren. Once unbound, though, Amren will be able to unleash herself upon the Hybern army and wipe them off the battlefield. So really similar end results, just different methods of getting there, which is why I'm like, did she really lie? I don't know if she did.
Yeah, Right before going into the cauldron to be unbound, Amren gives quite the heartfelt goodbye, at least for her heartfelt. Varian comes upon them just in time, quote, like a hound on a scent, and he begs her not to do this, because once Amren is unbound, she is lost to this world. She is sacrificing herself so that she can wipe Hybern off the board. And it's a bittersweet moment for her. She has lived a long life, and she does feel a sense of fulfillment.
However, this plan is not without its consequences. If Amren is unleashed, she will not remember any of the Inner Circle members or people in her life like Varian. So while her body itself is not dying, the Amren that we know and love will cease to exist, which Feyre and Varian both have some feelings about. But Amren is not really known for her emotions on a good day, and this is something that she has wanted for such a long time. Back in ACOWAR, when Rhys brought up the possibility of them unbinding Amren and the possibility of her being able to go home, her reaction was so raw and full of Amren emotion as she longingly said thank you to Rhys for it even just being a possibility. And now here it is, like seconds away within her grasp.
Amren recounts her life and this final goodbye, how she watched humans in her world, watched them love and hate, wage war and find peace, watched them build lives and worlds, but being the creature she was never allowed such things. She wasn't designed that way. She had not been ordered to do so. So all she could do was watch. Then she came here to this world. At first, she thought that this world was some hell her father locked her in for disobeying his orders, for wanting in the first place. But now she wonders if her father opened that rip in the world and sent her here actually as a gift, so she could experience what she desperately wanted from her homeland. Quote, "For it has been a gift this time with you, with all of you. It has been a gift." I feel like there's a lot of speculation here to unpack. Without giving spoilers, we know that Sarah J. Maas's series are all connected through the same universe. That's why it's called the Maasverse. Is Amren's world from another world that we already know? I'm personally leaning towards no.
Yeah, same. I really think that this is more, I'll call it religious parallels than anything. I do have a separate theory, which I'll get into in Maasverse Madness, but I will get more into the religious parallels in a moment.
There are also rumors that SJM has another series brewing that is the ultimate crossover or bridge of these three worlds that we already know. Again, that's only a rumor. There is no confirmation with that. I could definitely see Amren and her homeworld being a huge factor in later books and even later series. In fact, I strongly believe, or at least hope, that she'll play a critical role in either an upcoming ACOWAR book or a future series, because I really want to believe she had to come back in this book for a bigger reason than what we got. She turns to Varian and tells him in so many words that through their relationship, she finally understood the concept of love.
Do you think that they are fully in love by the end of Silver Flames? I mean, he's literally on his knees right now, begging her not to go into the cauldron. Like, this dude fell so hard so fast.
Yeah. Oh, I think that they definitely are in love. Again, I don't think that they're mates, although I do wonder if she's able to become a mate. And I don't know how all of that works. I could definitely see them suddenly becoming mates in a later book. But yeah, definitely. They're, of course, in love.
So turning to Feyre, she speaks the unbinding spell into Feyre's mind. I'm shaking my fists into the air about this, because how did she do this? How did she speak words into her mind? I did not realize that people who were not Daemati could open up the telephone pathway into a Daemati's mind. So there is the argument that since Feyre is Daemati, she does hear from Cassian or from people who are not her mate in her own mind. But I'm pretty sure she has to initiate the conversation. I
will say this, that Amren, in my perspective, gets a pass because she is not of this world. She has her own kind of crazy powers. And we have also speculated, because she has told Rhys before that she will send him a warning. So this is actually on point for Amren. And I will give her a pass because she is not of this world. It's the other guys. It's Draken and Kalias that I'm wondering about.
Okay, that's a fair point. I will absolutely get with that. Anyway.
With her final goodbyes and a warning not to run once she's free or it'll attract her attention, Amren swings herself into the cauldron.
As Amren's tiny ancient body goes under the dark water, Fae-vorite begins to speak the words of the spell over and over again, until far beneath the soil, all the way down into the earth's core, something begins to shudder. And with just enough time to run behind a rock, Fae-vorite and Varian witness the cauldron shatter into 3 pieces and light exploding out of it. Roaring in victory, rage, and pain, this creature has great burning wings, a crown of incandescent light floating just above her flaming hair. Like we so often do with Amren, it is time for Religion Watch. We know from SJM interviews that she equates Amren with an Old Testament angel. This interview is from the special edition of Frost and Starlight, where she says, quote, "Okay, so Amren is basically an Old Testament angel. Not one of those angels with pretty white wings. Hers are more like wings of raging fire. Think of the angel of death, that sort of angel. Essentially, she's an angel assassin that got tired of doing God's dirty work and became curious about what else was out there, what else existed in other worlds. So when she saw a portal open in the sky, she went through. And through a course of events that I'd love to tell one day, became trapped in her body. Poor Amren." First and foremost, that I'd love to tell one day. Are we actually getting an Amren backstory, or is this new series possibly an Amren series? Like, I need to hear how she became a raging sports fan. Like, I need that so badly. But when Amren mentions earlier that she disobeyed her, quote, father's orders, she is referring to her father as God here, I'll say for lack of a better term. And in many religions, the angel of death is the angel that is sent by God to bring about death. Notably, it is not mentioned in the Bible itself. However, it is mentioned in the Quran and is called the Malik al-Mut. And guess what the angel of death's name is in the Quran, Lexi?
What is it?
Azrael. But it is spelled differently. I will say that. Anyway, back to Flameo Amren. She pauses as she flies out of the cauldron to look at Varian and Fae-vorite. I guess the rock that they hid behind didn't really do a whole lot. And she almost has this look of like, hey, I do remember you. And I love this. I don't take this so much as I was mistaken about not remembering you, but more so that their bonds were so deep that it carried over into her angel of death life.
Yes, exactly. Yep. I love that.
Flameo Amren continues to move, spreading her wings, quote, no more than a burning behemoth that swept down upon Hybern's armies, who begin running away. Yay! But no luck. As Amren passes through them, they die on the spot, either from being burned alive, having her drink their death, whatever that means, or some just die at a mere whispering of her passing, including the Hybern commanders, one of which was about to make that death blow to Helion, not the type of blowing Helion likes. Angel Amren left no Hybern soldiers alive and no Hybern boats upright as she flies into the sea. And with that, our crew is victorious.
Can I just say, wow, Amren Unleashed is so insanely powerful. Think about it. We already had 3 monsters on this battlefield, 2 of whom were immortal death gods that were killed. And even with those 3 monsters, our crew was still being overwhelmed by Hybern. And now Amren swoops in to kill tens of thousands of Hybern soldiers just like that. We know that she, Striga, and the Bone Carver are from different worlds. We don't know Bryaxis' origin, though. And Amren is that much more powerful than these 2 otherworldly death gods. That is mind-boggling to consider and leaves me with so many questions about this larger universe. Now we have to ask ourselves a question that has been circulating around the fandom. Is this plot device of Amren wiping everyone out a little too convenient? In many ways, yes. And at the same time, there has been build-up to it where it flows for the story. We needed a final showdown. We needed our side to somehow win against the odds. And we've known since meeting Amren that she is a terrifying, all-powerful, and otherworldly creature trapped in a Fae body, and that the Book of Breathings and the Cauldron may have the capacity to unbind her and free her. So is it a little convenient that she's the answer to Hybern losing once and for all? Yes, of course, I won't deny that. Is it coming out of left field? No, we've gotten plenty of foreshadowing up to this point where it fits within the story. I question more why our side didn't focus more on a strategic plan to lure the king away from the Cauldron sooner than, their plan of like at the height of battle. It could have saved a lot of lives if they set a trap for him earlier, but it is what it is. And like I said, we needed an epic final showdown that keeps us on the edge of our seats. Out at sea while taking out the last of Hybern's ships, Amren's life sputters out. Quote, Amren reached the final boat, the very last ship of our enemy, and was no more than a flame on the breeze. And with that, Amren went out in the most badass way anyone can. She left this world as her true self, protecting the good of the world that she had been defending as Rhys's second for centuries. R.I.P. Amren, you tiny ancient one. Thank you for saving everyone. What a beautiful farewell to her with such powerful and emotional storytelling as we say farewell to her. We may be sad to say goodbye to her, but there's a sense of completeness. And I'm going to leave it at that for right now. While our forces are crying out in victory across the battlefield, there is one thing that isn't so good. The cauldron broke into 3 pieces from unleashing Amren. Quote, perhaps I had done it. In unbinding her, I had unbound the cauldron. Or perhaps Amren, in her unleashed power, even that had been too great for the cauldron. I personally think it's the latter. After we were just talking about how powerful Amren is, I think that her power was too great for the cauldron and being unleashed broke it. Because she is not of this world and the cauldron is of this world. We're going to be talking about that a lot more in today's Suriel. The only other option, like Thera said, is that because they are both so incredibly powerful that to speak the spell to unbind Amren accidentally also unbound the cauldron too. I could see this being possible, but there's so much emphasis on the cauldron cannot be destroyed. And I do like that an otherworldly powerful creature is what ended up destroying it because that was not on its bingo card. But the point is, the cauldron is broken, and nobody remembers what the bone carver warned about the cauldron, apparently. Quote, it could not be destroyed, for it had made all things, and if it were broken, then life would cease to exist. Oh,
with the cauldron being broken into 3 pieces, and because my brain was apparently so into religion watch in this episode, I wanted to look up the religious meaning of the number 3. In Judaism, it means the unity of 2 extremes, made and unmade, you say?
I love that.
Isn't that
Don't
cool?
forget about the 3 feet.
Never forget about the 3 feet.
As a result, the void from the cauldron is leaking into the world. And here we get a bunch of descriptions of opposites, which is the point, like Nicole was just saying. Quote, the thing in the cauldron, or lack of it. It was lack in substance, absent in presence, and it was leaking into the world. What I beheld in those ruins of the cauldron, it was a void, but also not a void, a growth. It did not belong here, belong anywhere. The only thing I can equate this to is like a black hole, and the world is slowly collapsing in on it. So it's not actually collapsing in on it. It's almost like this black hole is spreading out onto the world and devouring it. This void, like I said, is leaking out into the world to consume it and make it disappear.
Back in ACOWAR, when Fae-vorite is looking at the cauldron birth wall mural, she sees, quote, a mighty black cauldron held by glowing, slender female hands in a starry, endless night, whose hands tipped it over, golden, sparkling liquid pouring out over the lip. No, not sparkling, but effervescent, with small symbols, perhaps of some ancient fairy language. Whatever was written there, whatever it was, the contents of the cauldron were dumped into the void below, pooling on the earth to form our world. First up on the ancient fairy language, I am assuming this is the ancient Fae language that has not been spoken in 15,000 years, aka the Holy Tongue. But also the void language is so similar here. So I think you're pretty on it with the black hole language or the black hole thinking. And before you wonder, yes, we will be talking about it in Maasverse Madness today.
Before we start getting into the really heavy parts of this deep dive, let's lighten the mood with something that excites my kids. Hiya vitamins. As a parent, I'm always doing my best to make sure that my kids get the nutrients and vitamins they need to stay healthy and happy. That's where Hiya comes in. It's a pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin designed for kids 2 and up. Plus, it's sent straight to your door, so we parents have one less thing to worry about.
While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk. Yet it tastes great and is perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in most of the common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment kids need with a yummy taste they love. It is non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine.
My 2 and 3-year-olds absolutely love Hiya. It's become part of our morning routine for them to pick out which color they want, and they gobble it right up, which is really saying something for my son, who seems to only live off of berries and cheese. I gotta say, I feel like I'm winning as a mom when they get their nutrients. Plus, Hiya provides stickers flavors for the first order to decorate your bottle. And it's just the little things that make vitamins extra fun for the kids, you know?
We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamins. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, go to hiyahealth.com/FFG. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/FFG to get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
Rhys races up to Feyre, transforming into his Fae self and out of his beast form in real time. Feyre lets him into her mind because that's the easiest way to catch him up to speed with everything that has happened. With Amren, with her father, with the king dying. I can only imagine that quick reunion between the two of them. They did not think that they would get this, especially Rhys, who told Feyre to run when things got bad. No wonder our High Lord is shaking. It's so cute. But reunions after a perilous battle need to wait because the end of the world is literally at our friend's feet. I remember reading this for the first time and being like, well, that's a turn of events. Because, of course, in the moment, they had been dealing with the enemy right in front of them. Destroy Hybern to save the world as they know it. But every action has a consequence, and by unleashing Amren and destroying Hybern, the cauldron is broken, and the world is about to literally cease to exist. And friends, this is one of those situations where there isn't a deeper explanation beyond the magical explanations that are available to us. This world's existence is directly tied to the all-powerful cauldron that theoretically made this world, but more on that in today's Suriel. Now it is unmaking the world because, of course, it is broken. But because Feyre is also made, she can remake the cauldron, or at least try, as Rhys urges her. They have to at least try. He is never willing to give up. And even though he knows in this moment what it likely will mean for him, he isn't letting his playful nature falter because he needs to help ease her terror. Remembering the spell that she used to unbind Amren, Feyre alters it just a little bit. So now she's redoing the spell just with the opposite effect.
Honestly, go Feyre, because apparently she learned the Bob language well enough to know what word to alter. Imagine if she used the wrong word. Like, instead of saying cauldron, she said cast iron skillet. And then the entire turn of events that would have been. This is one of those where I just have to be like, all right, take me on a plot journey.
Exactly. Serving as a conduit again to reforge the cauldron, Feyre's conscience falls into the void of the cauldron. Quote, I was both form and nothing. Again, all of that opposites language there. Behind her, Rhys pours his power into her. Nice. His power surges through her and into this void to be shaped as she wills it. I love how Feyre recalls the mural back in the spring court, where the mother pours the cauldron and its contents make up this world. In this moment, Feyre is a direct representation of the mother, quote, cupping my hands as if the cracked thirds of the cauldron could fit into them, the entire universe into the palm of my hands. She's got the whole world
in her hands.
She speaks the spell, or the revised binding version of it, and lets Rhys's power flow through her. She steadily begins to put the cauldron back together, causing the void to regress as each crack heals. But it's not enough. She needs more power, and she personally doesn't have it. So Rhys, on his last bit of strength, gives her more of his magic, all of his power that he has in him, so she can be this powerful conduit who can bind the cauldron and keep this world alive.
As Rhys pours every ounce of himself through the Fae-vorite conduit, he says, I love you, all while having his shields up. As we know, this is not just assuring his mate that he does indeed love her. No, this is a goodbye. And the reason his shields are up is because he doesn't want her to know what he's about to do. As Feyre notes later, he knows his mate so well that if she had known what he was about to do, aka self-sacrifice, she would have rather the world ended than give up Rhys's life. And folks, it comes to no one's surprise that our self-sacrificing dude is about to sacrifice himself. And in fact, this is so on brand for Rhys that Helion later even says, quote, of course he did. Everything Rhys has done, from going under the mountain, attempting to make a deal with Hybern at the end of ACOWAR, getting angry with his family when they almost sacrificed themselves, every ounce of guilt and wish to do more and more and more has been leading up to this. That he would give his life to reforge the literal world, and therefore everyone he loves, a chance to continuing to live. Remember earlier, he mentioned that he has not given enough, not yet. Well, now he has, because with every morsel of power from Rhys and using Feyre as the conduit, they have put the cauldron back together again. Quote, I turned. It took me a moment to grasp it. what I saw. Rhys was sprawled on the rocky ground, wings draped behind him. He looked like he was sleeping, but as I breathed in, it wasn't there. That thing that rose and fell with each breath, that echoed with each heartbeat, the mating bond, it wasn't there. It was gone because his own chest, it was not moving, and Rhys was dead. Oh, I want to go back to the first time you were reading this. What were your thoughts, Lex? Like, were you... Well, I'll say, like, were you emotionally impacted? But did you immediately know he was going to be resurrected? Did you think he was going to stay dead? What were your thoughts?
I think I even remember texting you and being like, oh my God, Rhys is dead. And it's like that initial shock value, absolutely. However, when I thought about it a few more moments, because I did definitely turn the page and keep reading, I needed a moment to pause and kind of, sit with myself for a moment. And that's when I texted you. And I wasn't surprised that he died. And I also kind of assumed that he was going to come back in some way. And I wasn't I read it and was immediately like, oh, well, he's coming back. It wasn't like that at all. It was like I felt all the emotions. And then after I processed those, within like a minute, then it's like, okay, let's see how he comes back.
That's similar to how I felt. Yes. I would say, I don't even know if I had the oh my God. I think I was just kind of like, that doesn't add up. Let's keep reading and see how he comes back. Because I think I also immediately was like, oh, well, all, the High Lords are here. That's why Fae-vorite could have, that's one of the reasons Fae-vorite could have been made a High Lady. All this kind of stuff where I was like, oh, well, that's really convenient. I will say now that we've done the deep dive, because at first I was like, oh, this is just here for shock value. This is almost kind of I'll say a little rolling my eyes at it. Now that we've deep dived the book and how much self-sacrificing foreshadowing there is, I'm much more like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense with the story. So I'm much more at peace with this part being part of the story. Now, this is one of those SJM, they die and then they come back to life where I'm like, yeah, if he had stayed dead, that would have not been great.
Yes. So let's get into that. I know you and I have given SJM a hard time throughout this deep dive for too few characters staying dead. And we can laugh about that, right? And while Rhys is a prime example, I really do understand the storytelling of why he was resurrected, like you were saying with that self-sacrifice. First of all, this is a romance book, and the fandom would riot if Rhys stayed dead after everything we've been through. We all need our happily ever after. And this adds to the plot in its own meaningful way. Rhys has already experienced what it's like for his mate to die, even though their bond hadn't snapped into place yet. And now we get that from Farah's perspective, where she knows what it's like for that bond to go silent and how deep that goes in her soul. It shows us how impossible it feels to live after your mate is gone, leading to the end of this book with their bargain to leave this world together, because neither of them can bear to experience this exact thing again. It is also the ultimate sacrifice for Rhys, which his whole character is building up to for several books now. Of course Rhys would do this, but also of course we still need our favorite High Lord for the happily ever after. And the other biggie is bringing Tamlin into the mix for his resurrection. It is ironic and full circle storytelling for Tamlin to be needed to help Rhys and Farah in the most important way of all. It's also an important moment for his character arc and the closure between him and Farah, which I'll get into more momentarily.
I want to do just a quick fun fact, because Rhys's death actually happens on page 666 in ACOWAR, back to Religion Watch. In the New Testament, the book of Revelation, 666 is associated with the number of a man or the number of the beast. But in modern pop culture, 666 has become most wildly recognized for the Antichrist, or alternatively, the devil. Because we are so often in Judaism, I do want to point out that 666 does have no meaning in the Jewish religion. So this could just be I'll call it a happy accident, I guess, but I just thought that was always very funny whenever I saw that.
As the other High Lords are trying to see if there is anything they can do to help Rhys, and then comforting a shattered Farah, she is grasping onto the torn scraps of the mating bond. She's staying with her High Lord, just like the Suriel told her to do, holding onto the tiny bit left of him and tugging as if he'll answer. Quote, I clung to those scraps and remnants, clawing at the void that lurked beyond. She snarls a demand to the High Lords, bring him back. They did it for her after all. Can't they do it for him?
Side note, huge shout out to Melody Muse, who plays Fae-vorite in the graphic audio, because this part is chilling. Just like, oh my God, how she does. It's brava. She's amazing.
And it's very fair for her to think this. Helion claims that it's not the same because she was a human, but she insists, again, fair because she has nothing left to lose. You can feel her pain through the pages, her shattered heart, the void of the bond, and her desperation to try anything and everything. I love this writing. It's so sad and heartbreaking. And it's just so there, and you are in her emotions with her.
Well, I was going to say, like, SJM is a master at writing in the alignment with what someone is emotionally feeling. Everything in this passage, from the short sentences to the repeating words, Fae-vorite not even finishing her sentences most of the time, it is masterful. It immediately puts you in her head even more so than you already are.
Exactly. It feels so fitting that it is Tarquin who steps forward and gives his seed of light. Sorry, I'm going to try to say this without laughing every time.
You say?
And it's exactly the same thing that the High Lords had done to resurrect Feyre. Despite Rhys deceiving him to steal the book, Tarquin is an optimist, a fellow dreamer. These two have bonded over that shared vision of a brighter future for their people. Tarquin is observant enough to have recognized that Rhys wore a mask under the mountain, as he notes while giving Rhys his seed of life, quote, for what he gave today and for many years before. He realized that Rhys did Amarantha's bidding to help the others, and he will always remember that. And Rhys gave Tarquin's cousin a swift, merciful death while lying to Amarantha, saving many more Summer Court rebels and Tarquin himself in the process. We also can't forget that Rhys brought his forces in to help Tarquin, fought for the Summer Court. And when asked why he did it, Rhys answered, "Isn't that what friends do?" So it's not a surprise that Tarquin is the first High Lord to step up and essentially say, I'll try to see if this works for him. Second to offer up a kernel of light is Helion, which is, again, no surprise because he and Rhys are friends. Of course, he would be among the first to step up. Then we have Callias, who has finally started slowly warming up to Rhys, mostly thanks to his mate. Then we have Thesan, the most pragmatic of the bunch. And finally, Baron, who just stands there silently insinuating, nah, I don't want to. I love how it's Mor who literally threatens his life at sword point, and she means it too. She won't let this terrible old fart be the reason why Rhys doesn't have a chance at resurrection, as much as Rhys dying would delight Baron. So he, quote, practically chucked that fleck of light onto Rhys. Feyre is taught how to will that spark of life so that she can contribute as High Lady of the Night Court, which pause, because this is interesting. We know that she has the power of all 7 High Lords and chose to be the High Lady of the Night Court, but High Lords are typically chosen by the land itself for their strength and power. So while she came into her High Ladyship in a different manner, she still holds the power of the 7 High Lords. I assume she is able to summon that High Lord / High Lady power from within, and therefore it can serve as one of the necessary 7 seeds of life. This is why it wouldn't be possible otherwise. If a High Lord died and there were only 6 others, they wouldn't be able to resurrect, assumably. Goes to show once again how unique this is and why it's never even been fathomed before. Speaking of, that's only a count of 6 courts giving Rhys their kernel of light. They still need Tamlin to have a chance at resurrection, and we all know what a record scratch moment that is and why. I remember reading this for the first time and being like, oh, we've endlessly covered the bad blood between Rhys, Tamlin, and Feyre on the podcast, so we don't need to explain why this is such a monumental moment for all of them. Quote, there was no kindness on his face, no mercy. Feyre begs him, weeping, saying she will give Tamlin anything. And that causes a shift in Tamlin. His green eyes swim with some emotion that she can't place. Soon enough, he says, quote, be happy, Feyre, and drops that kernel of light onto Rhys. We know that he still loves her, despite how much she hurt him and how much he does hold hate for her while wanting revenge against the Night Court. But as he proved at the Hybern camp, he doesn't want her dead. They have been through a lot together, both good and bad, and at the end of the day, they weren't meant to be. I'll argue that even at the High Lords meeting, Tamlin refused to fully accept that. But now he does. You cannot forgive someone and still want the best for them. Tamlin isn't resurrecting Rhys for Rhys's sake, but he does do it for Feyre. It's his way of finally saying, I accept that he is your mate, and I want you to be happy and live your life with him. That is real growth for Tamlin, and I really love how this moment is the first step toward his and Feyre's closure. Soon enough, she will extend further closure for the two of them in her note to Tamlin, which says, Thank you. I hope you find happiness too. And she means it, both because she is so grateful for what he does for Rhys, but also because she wants to release the hatred between them. Quote, even for an immortal, there was not enough time in life to waste it on hatred, on feeling it and putting it into the world. What a shift after Feyre was seething with rage earlier in this book. She learned the consequences of her grudge and her hatred. And at the end, they choose to put their feelings of being wronged aside to focus on the bigger picture, to choose happiness and hope over hatred and revenge. I say all of this also without looking ahead to the next two books and the state Tamlin falls into, because his character growth and acceptance takes a sharp turn that we'll discuss the ins and outs of later. Because right now, at the end of this book, I would say he gets a soft redemption arc. It's not big and grand or crazy amounts of character development like we received with Nesta, but it's just enough for us to feel closure after everything we've been through. Are we still mad at him? Yes, absolutely. Does he still need lots of therapy? Absolutely. But there is a sense of growth here that we have to acknowledge here.
I can see how this is a soft redemption. And I can't ignore how much there is in his body language that looked like he was about to be petty and walk away, assumably wanting her to lose something too, just like he lost so much at her hands. Do I appreciate that he finally does give up his kernel seed? Sure. Yeah, of course I do. And I do completely agree with you that I wish you the best, but from afar feeling on both their ends. It's really not just one or the other. And honestly, I get that. I'm sure you and I both have those feelings towards some of our exes. Some things that I do want to point out from the scene in parallel with Feyre's resurrection, what Tarquin says, quote, for what he gave, is almost word for word what Rhys says to Feyre, quote, for what she gave. Tamlin is also the last to drop his seed life kernel thing on both dead bodies each time. He's the last to do it to Feyre because he does it right on her boobies, and then he kisses her passionately and she wakes up. But with Rhys here, he is the last for obviously much different reasons. And also both times, if we're talking order, the Night Court is the second to last to drop the seed. I can't say the word seed without just becoming a tomato. With all the seeds of life absorbed into Rhys's skin, now comes the waiting game. And in the silence, Feyre begins to tell him everything about her side of their story. I imagine this is almost her version of Chapter 54, that we readers have been along with Feyre on this ride for now almost 3 books. She tells him about the night in Calamai when she heard the voice beckoning her to the hills, wondering if that voice was his all along. From ACOWAR, quote, but a wild, wicked voice weaving in between the drum beats whispered otherwise. Go, that voice said, tugging at me. Go see. Wild? Wicked? That sounds like a Rhysand. But I do wonder, because Feyre is telling Rhys's body this story while people are still around. So I bet you anything that Tamlin is listening to her own Chapter 54, which brings me to a theory. Like you said, Lexi, he does take a sharp 90-degree turn for the worst after this book and becomes fully absorbed in his beast mode. And that's the nicest way I can put it. Does hearing this side of Feyre's story switch something in him? I would be more able to buy his sharp turn if there was some new piece of info, or hell, maybe this, made him do some self-reflection, God forbid. I mean, it's Tamlin, so maybe he doesn't take it well, and that's why he turns into this beast guy. I don't know. I do want to keep this top of mind as we go into the next 2 books for Tamlin, because I want there to be a reason as to why he does such a harsh turn. But I could see this being one of them if he does get more information.
She will also tell her whole story about the love that she had originally found and then the love that saved her during the meeting. And she says it partly to Tamlin. He is definitely in the room then. So I could absolutely see this being a factor, and it almost festers in his mind. And I also do have to point out too that we are going to be talking about Nesta, who she had a huge traumatic event, and then that shifted something in her. And we could say something similar about Tamlin, where in this moment, it's almost like in the heat of the moment about everything happening, he is willing to be the bigger Fae and do this here. When he is expected to help resurrect Rhys, he does do it, and he truly does, want her to be happy. And there is that sense of closure that they have, but there's still that big wound there. And then it's almost like it gets infected, so to speak, especially maybe with her words and really letting that all fester within him. And then that makes him turn for the worse. Not unlike how Nesta goes through her own traumatic events and has her own bad turn of events too.
Okay. I can vibe with that as well. Definitely. I do love that Tamlin hears from Feyre's side of the story not once but twice within like a 24-hour period, where he's probably just like, I get it already. Okay, I get it. He's your mate. Whatever. Like, but anyway, back to the moment we've been waiting for. Da 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 da. The thud sounds and he lives. And because it's Rhys, he has to make a snide remark when he comes back to life. He says, quote, "If we're all here, either things went very, very wrong or very right." Door number 2, my guy. I love the second thing out of his mouth is reassuring the other High Lords, like, don't worry, I didn't steal any of your powers. Of course, you can almost hear Baron's like, oh, exhale and relief. The only reason I can think of this happening, like, why did he not get the powers but Feyre did, is because Feyre was literally turned a different species, whereas Rhys remained High Fae. Yes. But the surprises aren't done. Quote, Rhys pointed with a hand toward the cauldron. Someone fish out dear Amren before she catches a cold. And the tiny ancient one also lives.
Okay, everybody, I need to talk about this. While I can understand and appreciate the storytelling reason for Rhys coming back to life, as we discussed, I struggle with Amren coming back. Don't get me wrong. I love Amren. I don't want her to be dead, and I'd be sad if she stayed dead. But that's kind of the point. We need that emotion, that lasting impact in this final showdown. As I was saying earlier in this episode, we get such a beautiful goodbye with Amren and a sense of emotional closure as she saves Prythian at the cost of her unbound life. Rhys just came back to life and we all feel such relief. And then it feels kind of cheapened when he's like, well, there's another surprise, everybody. I can understand how she and Rhys found each other in the beyond, and he reached out a hand to bring her back if she wanted. And I understand.
You know what would have been so much better in this moment is if we got a snapshot to a Rhys POV and he reached out his hand to her and she, like, it was a, you know,
she had the choice and she chose to go beyond.
She chose to go beyond. Like that would have been, I would have been weeping my flipping eyes out if we had a King's Cross moment, but in Rhys's POV. Like that would, and obviously without choosing to go back to Hogwarts, but still, like that would have been just so good. Whatever, it's fine.
Yes, exactly. So I will say I understand how she chose to come back as a simple, minimally powered High Fae, but there's such a big but next to it. It would have been a bigger emotional impact if she stayed dead, both for her unleashing and taking Hybern down and for Rhys coming back. I'm left wondering why this was important for the story. We talked about why it is for Rhys, but why for Amren? Because I actually do like when my heart is ripped out and a beloved character dies when it makes sense for the story. And in this case, it would have made absolute sense if she stayed dead. All I can do is hold on to hope that she'll play a bigger role later in the series when we all go, oh, that's why she came back. But to be honest, I don't know if we're going to get that.
I agree pretty much 90% with you. Like, would this have been a bigger emotional impact if this was the end of her tale? Yes, 1000%. And I'm looking ahead in the story and I'm like, who would have filled the roles that she plays? You know, she's Nesta's tutor, and I'll actually even say she's Nesta's lack of a tutor, notably. Who would have given the download about Gwydion and Narbin and all that kind of stuff in Silver Flames, and the, you know, the ataraxia, how those swords come to be. And most notably, why I do believe she was brought back. And if there is a reason in a future ACOWAR book, I think that this is it. Who would be pushing Rhys to be High King? Because I think that she's going to be the biggie who does that. But that's 3 things. And honestly, Rhys could have easily given the download about Gwydion. I think it would have been actually really interesting if Nesta's magic tutor became Rhys. I think that would have been or honestly, fuck it, even more. Like if it, because then that would have given Mor and her a opportunity to hate each other less. And, you know, they have like the complicated relationship with Cassian and all that kind of stuff. And I think that would have been a really awesome way for her to befriend Mor. Whatever, it's fine. And honestly, who would be pushing Rhys to be High King? It'd be Cassian and Asriel, I feel like.
I don't know about that. I see what you're saying. I think that those shoes could have definitely been filled by other people there. And again, we love Amren. This is not saying we wish you were gone, Amren. It's simply when we're talking about the emotional impact of the storytelling and how this adds to the story. We're struggling with it. Okay, as we're wrapping up our coverage of the war, all I can think about is what it will be like for our beloved crew when they finally get to rest in their Miracle Made sheets now that all is well.
Seriously, I love my Miracle Made sheets. We've actually been tagged in a few stories recently that people are getting Miracle Made sheets. It's amazing. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get a better night's sleep every night.
Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. I swear, one of my favorite moments of each day is that exact moment when I hop into bed and just snuggle up and feel so nice and cozy in my Miracle Made sheets.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40% off. And if you use our promo code FF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use code FF to claim your 3 free-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that is trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you so much, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
Okay, now that we've got the Amren stuff off of our chest, let's turn our attention to someone who did die.
What a transition. Wow. The 3 sisters arrived to Papa Archeron's body, not yet being picked apart by the crows, unlike the King of Hybern's mangled remains. And while the 3 sisters grieve, they do so quite differently. Elaine, ever loving to their father, arranges flowers around his head and chest. Quick plant watch mode, just to cover my butt. There is a sort of type of flower mentioned. It's called the errant flower. However, while this is a type of flower, its meaning of which I cannot find anywhere on the internet, errant is also an adjective meaning straying from proper discourse. And since it's described as a flower that Elaine needs to adjust on Papa Archeron's chest, I don't think it's the flower type, and instead it is the adjective. So this is the most unnecessary plant watch ever. You're welcome. Back to Elaine. We're called back to the opening chapters of ACOWAR when it's describing Elaine's relationship with Papa Archeron. Elaine is the only daughter who acknowledges his existence or even speaks to him with any kind of kindness. And she asks in this moment of his burial if they should say a prayer, which brings us to Feyre. Feyre, who has been mostly observant up until the point of the prayer, brings out the Prithian prayer that we have heard before. Quote, "Mother hold you, may you pass through the gates, may you smell that immortal land of milk and honey." It's a shorter version, but it is such a full circle moment for us readers hearing this almost 2 books later. The last time we heard it was the second fairy in the 3rd trial under the mountain. Feyre begins to cry as she uses her last ember of magic to light a pyre for Papa Archeron. Feyre has had a more complex relationship with her father. She didn't dote on him like Elaine necessarily, but she also wasn't hostile towards him like Nesta. It was more toleration mixed with bitterness.
Yeah, I think also back to when she thought it was her father who came back to save her in ACOWAR, when of course it was actually the Puka. And there were so many feelings that came up. The hope that she felt of seeing her father. She didn't think twice with that feeling of, for once, he was there to save her. And I think back to that, and it just really shows how complicated and layered her feelings are for him.
Well, and it makes this moment where he does come to save them so much, this is something we've been building up to, and it just hasn't been happening over and over and over again. Oh, last but not least, we have Nesta, who, if Elaine wears the emotions of sadness and grievance on her sleeve, Nesta is the polar opposite. This is where we readers really start to see the next phase of Nesta take root. She has fully retreated into herself. Her face is not shifting once throughout the entire burial. She was hostile towards her father, most of the time outright ignoring him because of how little he fought for his family's safety. And as we know, her silence in this scene is not from indifference that her father that she hated is now dead, but it's because she's now looking back on how she treated him for years and years and years when, as he said in his final words, he loved her from the moment he held her in his arms. So it's almost her now realizing, oh my God, I wasted so many years on this relationship with him. But like I said, we have an entire book on that. So we're going to put a pin in that for right now.
Our favorite one-eyed redhead returns. While we talked about him last episode with Draken, Miriam, Vasa, and Papa Archeron's arrival, this is the first time since his Valaris departure that we've seen Lucien on the page. We can immediately tell that the distance and time apart hasn't really changed Elaine's feelings toward him. He is visibly relieved to see her, and while she shows no sign of real warmth toward him, she at least inquires how he's doing and then faintly smiles at his response that he never wants to be in a battle again. Which, by the way, she does not even finish her question before he jumps in with his response. Like, he's so relieved that she asked him how he is. We already talked about this last episode, but it's worth bringing up again that Papa Archeron negotiated a deal with Vasa's keeper, Koschei, to let her temporarily come here. And once again, I have so many questions, but moving on because that's just going to get repetitive. I love that Lucien was successful in his mission in his own way. He might not have been the one to find and free Vasa, but he met up with the crew, got to know Papa Archeron, and has definitely been networking, which will come into play in Frost and Starlight.
Feyre asks Lucien where he'll go now that the war is over, which first he's going to help here, but then who knows? Quote, I nudged Elaine, who blinked at me, then blurted, you could come to Valaris. Before we get into Lucien's agreement, rapid agreement, I'll say, and what this means for the future, I do want to ask you, is Feyre here being more like the helpful sister moment, or is this classic Feyre meddling matchmaker? Because I'm definitely leaning towards meddling matchmaker and almost overstepping.
Can both be an answer?
Yeah, I think so.
While Elaine doesn't owe Lucien anything, her obvious indifference for him might not be totally fair to him when he has been respectful in trying to navigate the situation they're in. The fact is, they're mated and it's unavoidable. One way or another, as Rhys has explained, there will always be that bond. And while, again, I really want to emphasize it does not mean Elaine owes him anything or her love, he's still a good male who deserves basic kindness. So more than anything, I think it's Feyre's way of reminding her sister of her basic manners. Now, with that said, it is Feyre who knows Lucien better than Elaine. So if anyone should invite him to go anywhere based on the relationship that they have, it would be Feyre who, should take that initiative. So that's why I'm saying both. She's being a helpful sister and at the same time meddling.
Well, and Elaine, you say Elaine doesn't owe him anything. And I totally agree. And Elaine is also going through a breakup. And because of that, Lucien has been, taking a backseat. He saw an opportunity for him to go do something useful and let his mate do her own version of her healing. And that's, there was a lot more complicated reasons as to why he decided to go, but that was definitely one of them. And now that she is on her healing journey, she does have this connection to Lucien that the stars, the destiny have, created. So it's almost this element of why not explore it? I don't know if that's, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, she's just completely shut it out, or it's almost like no, I don't have a mate. And again, she is absolutely within her right to reject that bond. Yeah. And I think there's also this complication of she doesn't fully understand it and she does not want to.
Yes, agreed.
And she's not giving it even a possibility of exploring that or opening her mind to that possibility. Again, I understand all the sides of it, and I'm not trying to say that she needs to fling herself at him or try to be in a relationship. I just think that he has earned respect and kindness simply as another individual.
Well, and speaking of that kindness, how genuine do you think her "you could come to Valaris" is? Does she actually want him there, at least in this moment, so that she can get to know him? Is this the mating bond impulse taking place? Is Elaine just being a people pleaser?
I think it's mostly the latter. I think it's her being polite. She really doesn't understand or want to understand this mating bond, and she's just very indifferent to him.
Like you say, Elaine's in her right, but my heart also breaks for Lucien because I just want him to be happy. He deserves happiness. Lucien does agree to come to Valaris, though, despite seeing the sisterly meddling. But when he does come to Valaris, as Feyre will pointedly point out, Elaine makes no moves to get to know him. And we'll discuss this so much more in Frost and Starlight and the early stages of Silver Flames, because I do have really complicated feelings about this. Because yes, a huge reason that, he does come to Valaris is because of Elaine, and she did invite him. And as we've beaten the horse dead, she does not owe him anything at any time. Honestly, I cannot believe how much I've become more iffy on the Lucien and Elaine dynamic. When we first started ACOWAR, I wasn't like fervently in that camp, but I definitely was like, I leaned more into being a Elaine-Lucien shipper. I'm not against them now by any means, but I want to make that very clear, but my feelings have become much more complicated the more we deep dive this book.
I agree. And they'll become even more complicated when we get to Frost and Starlight. And I do think, too, I'm in the same boat as you, where I was a soft shipper of them. And now, after doing this deep dive, I genuinely don't see a path forward for them to be together, like the way that they are. Yeah, or the way that she is, really. In the aftermath of Lucien catching Farah up on his travels, we are introduced to another character, Miriam. We met her mate Draken last episode and did a Suriel Teatime on them, but here we actually meet her for the first time. I love how Farah notices that there is something still human about her because she is, after all, half Fae, half human, and Farah instantly likes her. While yes, I think that this is largely because of how warm and welcoming Miriam is right from the get-go, I also think Farah loves seeing someone who physically embodies how she has felt. Farah is a Fae who was once human, and these two worlds and behaviors have been a little conflicting for her since she turned Fae. She still has her human heart and is proud of that, and she is a Fae with a lot of power. It's just a nice little nod to her inner self, even as she fully embraces being Fae these days, but never forgetting her human roots. Also, Miriam immediately calls her High Lady, showing just how much she respects her and sets the precedent of, we are friends and I am on your side, embracing who Farah is, her power, and her role alongside Rhys. This introduction and the conversation that follows starts out light and playful, and we really see Rhys able to be his true self around different friends. Most of the time, he can only be his playful, kind, and carefree self when he's with the Inner Circle or in Valaris, or even around Helion, as we noted during that episode. But now we see him having other friends who he has dearly missed, who he is so grateful for, who he is giddy with excitement for them to get to know his mate. However, the lighthearted nature of this conversation turns to serious matters soon enough as Jurian is brought up. Miriam, Draken, and Jurian were all battling against one another, and the only reason Miriam and Draken didn't kill him is because Mor convinced them otherwise. Quote, and from the haunted gleam in Miriam's eyes, it seemed as if far more had occurred during that fight than they let on. What more happened? I need more of this story. Do you think that there is more to the Miriam, Draken, and Jurian story that we'll learn as a later plot point? Or is this just a reflection of their baggage and context that we'll never get because they're side characters?
I think, unfortunately, both. I'm 100% team there's more to the story. Do I think we're going to get more because they are side characters? I don't. We do not know Jurian's full side of the story, especially after he found out that Miriam and Draken are mates. I can't help but compare these three with Rhys, Farah, and Tamlin. Did Jurian have an unhinged reaction when he found out about their mating bond? Remember, he went to go kill Clythia, and they were under the impression that Clythia was just stop one on his rampage after this. We only know Jurian as 500 years later. I was a statement jewelry piece for 500 years. I maybe have a Nirvana moment. We only know that Jurian. There absolutely had to be more to the story. So maybe he did go a little unhinged, and that's why they're so ugh, because that I would get. Do I still think that was the time to battle him? No! There's notably no mentions of Miriam and Draken during the Band of Exile scene in A Court of Silver Flames with Jurian. So I don't know if that's just because it was a side character plot and just kind of was brushed under the rug, or if it's because Jurian was this is a little too raw. I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm with Vasa. I'm in the next chapter of my life.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that there is definitely more to the story. I don't know if we'll ever fully get it. Whatever that story is, I love how we feel the tension regarding Jurian and how Farah comes into the mix. Miriam very carefully asks, are you friends with our arch nemesis? Because I thought we were cool, girl. Farah responds that she doesn't think so, but he did help her a great deal and was ultimately truthful in the end, which, yes, it should count for something. Here I am standing Jurian because that's apparently what we do on the podcast these days. I don't think Miriam would like us very much. Darling Reese knows how to change the subject when it's a little awkward, as we readers and Thera miss a lot of unspoken context regarding Miriam and Draken and their feelings about Jurian. Reese is like, where's Nephel? She'll join for the formal meeting among everyone, but the way that Thera perks up, again, a full circle moment of her getting to meet someone she truly admires and who has guided her, offered strength when she needed it most. I bet Nephel will be so honored of her impact on the High Lady of the Night Court. Finally, the conversation ends on another serious note. You know how Kratea is so hidden, even friends aren't able to find it, and the island and its peaceful people are isolated, just living their best lives? Well, sounds like the perfect place to conceal the cauldron, don't you think? Because yes, the cauldron is going to be an issue soon. Honestly, I'm surprised no one brings up the cauldron during the meeting soon to occur. But moving on.
It's not like that was the big thing during the battle where it was like, we're so outnumbered and so shit out of luck because the King of Hybern has the cauldron. I do have a question for you. The cauldron's on Kratea. It's off in its little peaceful, happy-go-lucky land. Do you think it's ever going to come back into play in a future ACOWAR book?
I'm going to say no, because there have been too many seeds planted about other mysterious magic, like, for instance, Under the Sacred Mountains and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Agreed. I agree completely. And especially when it comes to, we have enough made objects where I feel like the only reason the cauldron would come back into play is for weapon making. We have Nesta, we have Truth Teller, there's this whole Narbin question mark that I'm going to lose my gourd over when we get to that in Silver Flames. So the only reason I feel like it would come back is for a weapon role, but Nesta is the cauldron now. She kind of fills that role instead.
I think so. Yes, absolutely. And you're right, because we have the Dread Trove as well. I think that the cauldron is done. I do think that it will still be on the chessboard, but it'll be more of like the concept of the cauldron versus all of this that we've gotten.
Yeah, like I don't think it's going to come back on the page, like physically on the page.
Yes.
Like it'll like they'll be like, oh, and the cauldron, da 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 da. But like we're not going to see it.
Yes, yes, it will still fill in some pieces to the puzzle. Yep. With any all-powerful artifact comes greed and mistrust, and it's only a matter of time before everyone starts fighting over it. Courts and others on the continent might be inclined to think that they should be the ones to guard it. And no matter what, no one will trust each other to agree on who can safely bear such great responsibility. So it makes absolute sense that our little crew here wants to secretly resolve that problem before it becomes one. And honestly, Kratea seems like a lovely place to keep the cauldron. Something to note, Miriam is also made and can theoretically wield the cauldron like Amren and the Archerons, though she would probably need the Book of Breathings to know the spell work, but it's lost to the void because toss it in there.
I'm going to go off on that later. I love that.
Was it a little presumptuous of the Night Court to do this without consulting anyone else? Maybe, but at the same time, they led the charge against the King of Hybern, so of course it's not surprising. They also were the ones to put the cauldron back together and save everybody twice, so they get rights to where the cauldron goes.
Yeah, I think that gives them the rights, but we are not done with politics. It's time for yet another meeting. One day after the conversation with Miriam and Draken, both Reese and Draken band together to get this meeting set up stat. But where do we have it? The Archeron's battered estate. This is such cool symbolism. In the first book, this estate was a symbol of human lives being touched by fairies, but without knowing it. In book 2, it was the physical landmark of humans and Fae coming together in times of war, with varying levels of success. And now here it is as a place to negotiate between the two broken pieces of war and the two war-battered peoples coming together.
As everyone enters, we get several people in the same room who, quite frankly, don't want to be in the same room together. For instance, Tamlin and Lucian. Just like the High Lords meeting, Tamlin comes alone. He may have mustered up a small spring court force, but the only one he ever truly had at his side was Lucian, his emissary. These two haven't seen each other since Thera and Lucian ran away after killing the Hybern twins. And remember that back then, Tamlin was wary that something might be happening between the two of them thanks to Thera's maneuvering. It's only been a few weeks since that encounter. Can't stress that enough. But anyway, it's only been a couple of weeks, but everything has changed. So this is a big moment for them to meet once again after all that has happened and after Lucian technically betrayed Tamlin, leaving him for the Night Court. Now, Tamlin does not know all the details, but in this moment, that's certainly how it seems to Tamlin. Lucian was his emissary, yes, and Tamlin would remind him that he worked for him, but Lucian was also Tamlin's best friend for decades. They were all each other had. had. I love how Lucien holds his head high in a show don't tell way that he's not going to be ashamed of his decisions or be scared of Tamlin seeing him again. Tamlin doesn't even say anything to him. Loathing simmers in his eyes when he sees Lucien in Illyrian leathers, not knowing that it was the only clothes available to him to wear, though I doubt it would make a difference because the symbolism is all there. Lucien ultimately chose their enemy, the Night Court, instead of Tamlin, his best friend. I don't blame Tamlin for his feelings being hurt here, although, of course, we've already discussed how he definitely brought this upon himself. Again, I'm looking through character lens, please understand. They'll end up having their confrontation in a few days when Lucien goes back to the Spring Court. He'll return to Velaris with a black eye and cut lip. Oof.
What the hell happened in that meeting? Like,
that's a good point. You know what? Any sympathy that I had for Tamlin and being like, well, yeah, okay, that's out the window after I just said like that. Yes, okay.
I feel like they either just beat the shit out of each other or Lucien got the shit beat out of him. I don't think that there's an in-between.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it's the latter.
Yeah. And Lucien will tell Feyre in Frost and Starlight, quote, "You ruined any chance I have of going back to Spring. Not to Tamlin, but to the court beyond his house. Everyone either still thinks the lies you spun or they believe me complicit in your deceit. And Tamlin will end up sending all of his belongings from Spring to be dumped on his Velaris doorstep."
Look, I have thoughts about this, but we have to save something for Frost and Starlight, so I'm going to hold off on word vomiting into a microphone.
This is only the very beginning of a long road ahead for Lucien, the fox without a home.
I love this little Feyre's meddling note here. She says, quote, "It was an effort to keep my mouth shut," as she watches this Tamlin-Lucien scene play out. That is a very on-brand thing for Feyre to note. I'm shocked she actually did keep her mouth shut, given her reputation. But we're missing one last key guest. Once night falls, who enters but Vassa? The sixth queen finally gets to attend a meeting at the Archeron estate. She has reddish gold hair, thick brows, framing stunning blue eyes. She has freckled golden brown skin and is only a few years older than Feyre. So I'm assuming she's like 24, 25. This young queen is fierce and untamed. This sounds a lot like how Jasminda was described earlier in this book. Quote, "Jasminda has been all laughter and mischief, too wild and free to be contained." Just saying! That's some pretty parallel language there, SJM. Her short and sweet conversation with Feyre is efficient and to the point, covering, number one, Vassa's condolences for Feyre and her sister's loss. Now, she does say, oh boy, this is a bad look for Vassa, quote, he was a better father to me than my own. I owe much to him and will honor his memory as long as I live," which I know it's meant to be in kindness. I'm not saying, whatever. And I'm going to chalk this up to the fact that she didn't know the details of their very complex relationship that the sister had with the deadbeat father that they had for years. And I'm putting myself in Feyre and Nesta's POV because Elaine's not in the scene. This is kind of a slap in the face.
Yes.
He didn't lift a finger for his daughters for years. He watched them starve, and he watched one risk their life regularly to finally help feed them. And then that same daughter, who regularly risked her life, went to the horrific Prythian in order to save them. And here is Vassa saying in subtext that he negotiated her temporary freedom on her behalf. Woof! The second thing they have in this conversation is Feyre's reputation precedes her. Feyre Cursebreaker. Hey, can you break my curse too? While this conversation ends with a, we can try. We know from A Court of Silver Flames that whatever deal Papa A cut with Coast J, it was quite extensive because it's not until the end of Silver Flames that Coast J finally says, "I'm waiting, Vassa." So I'm guessing a little over a year. Now, they did all try, and they even roped Helion into trying as well. So I guess you're shit out of luck. So who knows how that curse is finally going to get broken if it does? Probably Lucien?
Well, it's woven into her blood. And so they're like, Coast J's too good. Like, he did his job well. And so they're like, we don't know how to help. We're sorry.
Well, and I love the moment that Jurian's like, probably the only person who could have done this was the King of Hybern. And your sister told him. So I will say, I don't think the series is going to end and Vassa's still going to be chained to him in some way, but whether that means she's dead or that means Coast J is dead, who knows? We'll see. Let's get to the point of this meeting, shall we, rather than getting ahead of ourselves a book and a half. As we pointed out in episode 5, when Feyre is looking up info on the wall in the library, she learned that it was only supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be renegotiated along with the treaty when there was enough distance from the previous war. no time like the present. After coming together in war victoriously, humans and Fae now face the question, can we live in peace together without a wall separating us?
This initial meeting goes on for hours, and understandably, most people are short-tempered and exhausted after, that huge battle that they all just fought in. Highlights from the meeting include Fae-vorite telling the group her whole story, from their years in poverty as humans to the trials under the mountain to the love she let go and found. Yes, she said this in front of /to Tamlin. She even tells them nearly everything she had seen in the Ouroboros. All in all, she is exposing her true self, laying the whole truth out to start fresh and set the precedent for this open and honest meeting.
Well, and this is so parallel to how she told the Night Court, the Inner Circle, hey, we need to go into the High Lords meeting. We need to bear ourselves fully. So this is her doing that, but to an even wider group.
Miriam and Draken also tell their story too, quote, that humans and Fae could not only work together, live together, but become so much more. Again, that's really the point of Miriam and Draken in our story. A lot of people are like, I don't understand why they're even in this story. But Miriam and Draken really do represent that humans and Fae can come together and live in peace and prosperity. Others, however, share tales that weren't so happy, involving crimes and grievances that can't be forgotten. We cannot forget that the humans have a good reason to be terrified of the Fae, especially after what Amarantha has been letting loose the last 50 years. I know that there's a reason behind that, but Amarantha is not the only one at fault here, and that's a lot to let go for the humans. And I'm sure that there are some other Fae here as well who don't feel so good about humans either. The matter of crafting a new wall was at hand. That was part of the discussion here in this meeting. Do they create a new wall or do they not have a wall? And nobody can agree on that in this meeting. Most of the Prythian Fae are against building a new wall, though the High Lords quarreled the most about whether to have a new wall or not. Humans are wary of not having a wall, rightly so, and they have to all keep in mind the other Fae territories on the continent, remember that whole place there, who found Hybern's promises appealing, which could endanger the humans still without the wall, as will become true in Frost and Starlight. At least on the plus side, everyone stayed until the end of the meeting.
That is true. That is a plus. The bar is low.
And the Night Court didn't seem to attack anybody this time around.
That's true.
So. Of course, this was only the first stepping stone. I love how Fae-vorite reflects, quote, I wondered if the road ahead, the road to true peace, would perhaps be the hardest and longest one yet. Because yes, just because they beat the enemy does not mean that old baggage and prejudices just disappear. They will have to work through all that together, as we'll glimpse in future books and, of course, discuss all that at length.
Like any closing to a story, it's time to play Where Are the Side Characters Going? The High Lords all start winnowing away, assumably to their own courts or war bands to make sure everyone's good. Grayson left with the rest of his men without saying goodbye to Elaine, or anyone really. It's also noted that Elaine is still wearing her iron engagement ring, and this is the last time it is noted. So I guess somewhere between now and Frost and Starlight, she takes it off. That's progress. Go Elaine. Miriam and Draken leave quickly as to not raise the, hey, where's that pesky Cauldron? question. And Jurian has been offered a place in Vass's court. Good job, Jurian. A job which he seems to be kicking ass at, according to Lucian.
And us.
And us. Jurian's great.
He gets a letter of recommendation from FFG. Stamp of approval.
Oh my God. But what about our crew? A few days later, they arrive back in Velaris, and while the townhouse is still the same, there's even children outside laughing, as both Fae-vorite and Lucian individually noted when they arrived to Velaris for the first time. But even with these symbols of peace and calm everywhere around them, and with the victory still on their minds, they are different people upon coming home. In Rhys's POV, he will at first isolate himself in the kitchen, all the while his family laughs in the dining room. I want to go all the way back to the prologue of this book. Rhys was in the thick of war, looking for his brothers amongst the dead, and now he is surrounded by family and a future with his mate. Rhys tells his brothers, who have found him hiding out in the kitchen, that he is going to accept this gift of another life. He says, quote, we enjoy every heartbeat of it. This is also a beautiful reminder to us readers. There are always going to be chapters in life that are hard and a battle to walk through. Ups and downs are part of the journey we are on. But it is important for us to remember to enjoy every heartbeat of those ups.
Last little thing that I love so much about Rhys's POV is the descriptions about his mate and her laughter. It's such a beautiful way of show don't tell how much he loves her and is so grateful to spend this life with her.
It's like he's grateful for the little teeny tiny things rather than the big stuff, which is just... We interrupt this beautiful moment for a word from our favorite point of sale system. You know that's the sound of another sale at your online Shopify store. But did you know that Shopify powers selling in person too? That's right. Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere, whether that's online, in-store, on social media, and beyond.
Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. I love it. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. In fact, friends, if you have been to the Fantasy Fangirls merchandise store, that's powered by Shopify.
With Shopify POS, you can accept credit cards, mobile payments, and other major payment methods, all with low fees and transparent pricing, starting on day one. Take customers from picking it out to picking it up. Shopify syncs in-store inventory with Google, so when local customers search for that one thing that they want that you have, bam, you are right there. Demand meets supply.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/FFG. That is all lowercase, by the way. Go to shopify.com/FFG to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/FFG. Okay, we are in the home stretch. Let's talk about this ending, friends, and the bargain we all have so many feelings about. On the roof, Feyre finds Rhys alone, just him and the stars and their city. Now that it is just the two of them, he tells her that he heard what she was saying when he had gone beyond. Remember that while she waited and hoped for him to resurrect, she talked to him, told him of their story and how she fell in love with him, what he meant to her, how he helped her find life and joy again. And now hearing her made him look back and stay just a little longer. It's notable how Feyre tenses when reminded of how she almost lost him for good. Since he was resurrected, she has barely let him out of her sight because she needs that reassurance that he is real, he is here, and he survived the impossible. It's a terror she doubts she'll ever recover from. Speaking from personal experience, earlier this year, my husband had a near-death experience, and I am still emotionally traumatized from it. It's a lot of emotional stuff to work through, and they're only on the first few days, and it's going to take a very long time. And this situation that they were in was, he was dead, and I can't even fathom the terror that you would live with every single day after that, even when he is living and breathing and loving you right there. Each of them have had this horrific experience of having the other die, and it will forever haunt both of them. Their souls are intermingled. Their bond connects them on such a deep level that it feels impossible to live without the other. So Feyre offers that when it's time to go into the beyond, they go together, and the bargain is made. Feyre has a new tattoo on her left arm, twin to her original one with Rhys, and Rhys similarly has the same one from his wrist to elbow that fits around his Illyrian tattoos. All right, friends, now's the time that we ask ourselves, is this bargain that if the High Lord or Lady dies, the other dies with them? Is it smart? And I'll go ahead and answer first because I know you have some feelings about this, Nicole. From a political and practical sense, no, as we will learn in Silver Flames. But does it make sense for these two souls deeply connected and in love? Yes, and I will argue why. They can't live life without the other, and they each know that. So they agree not to. It's as simple as that. It's romantic and poetic, and again, makes sense from a storytelling perspective. Even if, when you take the emotion out of it, it is thinking too short term, and it will be detrimental to their friends in court, as well as for their future child. They're not really thinking about that right now. But this is a romance at the end of the day, and the storytelling can't take emotion out of it. So I'm going to be here to appreciate it is for what it represents between them. It's Rhys and Feyre together always in this world and the one beyond.
Fine. I guess I will accept this because I was about to... when I got to this part of the outline, I cracked my knuckles. I was ready to go off. They are the High Lord and Lady, and if they die, they are leaving the Night Court to their own devices, not to mention what heartbreak it'll do to the Inner Circle, not to mention that if they ever do have a kid, which they haven't decided on doing yet, but if they did, they would be orphaning a child in one fell swoop if one of them dies.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe. Politics aside, they can find somebody else to lead the Night Court, but... Come on, Nyx. I mean, of course, Nyx has lots of family and everybody loves him and supports him. I get that. But as a parent, yeah.
With all that said, all of that aside, this is extremely Rhys and Feyre. And when I put it in the factor of they've both watched the other die and they are saying, I cannot live through that again. I'm like, okay, if I think about it in that way, I can sit back and, close my mouth and accept this. But maybe I'm just way too like I am a romantic. I am just too practical for this level of romance.
And there we have it, everybody. We did it. We have reached the end of ACOWAR. And because this is the last only Feyre book, we really do view this as the end of a trilogy, with the next book and a half as expansions. So Nicole and I are going to take a moment here to give our closing thoughts on this trilogy.
Personally, I feel so happily completed with Rhys and Feyre's story. They get their happily ever after. And while I love getting their side plot in Silver Flames, maybe I don't love the side plot itself, but I love that they do have a continuation of the story. It's time to give way to the other vastly complex characters and their relationships that we see on these pages. Are we done with Rhys and Feyre for good? No, we still have a High King to figure out. But do I think we're ever going to be in their POV again outside of bonus chapters? I actually don't think so, and I'm really okay with that. Looking back on these 3 books, I really have a greater appreciation for this installment. It is an epic finale of a trilogy. And with that said, I do still, as of now, have it as the same ranking on my ACOWAR series rank in 4th place because of the plot holes and because coming off of ACOMAF, I really miss Rhys and Feyre's banter. Like they are in best friend mode, and don't get me wrong, I love that. But my husband and I are best friends and we still banter like crazy. And it just feels like it went from level 10,000 with ACOMAF to level 6. And I would have loved somewhere in the middle. We also, however, have not done Silver Flames or Court of Frost and Starlight in our deep dive format. So I have the right to change my mind still, friends. The last thing I do want to call out as we wrap this up with a nice little bow is I do want to call out the perfect ending to this book. Feyre thinks about how life is, quote, a gift, all of it. Why am I calling this out? Because the dedication at the top of this book is, quote, for Josh and Annie, a gift, all of it. This will never not give me chills. This is the ending line, how Feyre feels in her life, complete and precious at the very beginning of our story. It's just so beautiful. It perfectly sums up this epic tale. And again, we know it's not over, but the trilogy really feels like it has closed out here.
Absolutely. I agree with you about feeling complete with Feyre and Rhys's story. I know we'll get more from them in Frost and Starlight and then as side characters in Silver Flames, but this was a beautiful ending for their trilogy. Honestly, I didn't really care about reading Frost and Starlight afterward because I felt such a sense of completion here. Of course, I still read it and then loved Silver Flames too, but that goes to show how this wrapped up and I felt all warm and fuzzy. Remember, Nicole, I was like, okay, I'm good, I'm done. And you're like, no, you're not. You need to keep reading. While nothing can be ACOMAF's character development and love story, especially with the banter like Nicole was saying, I do love the fast-paced nature of this book and how our characters are truly the underdogs. It's got such an exciting final showdown. This book gives you all of the emotions, and I love any book that can give you the full emotional range. And there are some of my favorite moments and scenes in the series in this book. I love seeing Cassian and Nesta's relationship start to truly blossom on the page, and I love seeing Elaine's development too. That was a huge thing here on our deep dive. It's also been great to experience Feyre grow from her relationship with Tamlin, from where she started blazing with revenge to the end where she wants peace for him, even at a distance, which is entirely within her right. It's been wonderful to see her and Rhys's relationship strengthen. Even though we don't have the same super playful and fun banter, we understand even more why they are so perfect for one another. Does this book have more plot holes than the others that might have me saying, Cauldron, boil me? Yes. But I will say this, when there are so many players, so much more lore, more complex plot and politics, I'm not surprised by it, and I certainly don't knock the series or the author for it. ACOWAR is still ranked 2nd place for me in the series. It is still tied with Silver Flames. We will see how I feel about that at the end of the deep dive.
Are we going to do another full ranking at the end of the deep dive, do you think?
I think so, but I would be very surprised if mine changed.
Honestly, same. I would be too.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in, can't say the rest of this book, but at least the rest of the series.
All the mentions of reaching out a hand, from Feyre reaching out a hand to Nesta on their way to go bury their father, to how Rhys reached out a hand to Amren to see if she wanted to come back to life. Which, side note, I do wonder if this is where Amren got the idea to pass along to Cassian, where she says, keep reaching out your hand to Nesta to bring her back to life. Also, all the Nestas in rock bottom. I can't even say foreshadowing. It's not even foreshadowing. It's the beginning of Nesta in her rock bottom. In the days back in Valaris, Feyre mentions how she's barely spoken or visited Cassian as he's healed. It really shows just how quickly she began pulling away from the group and her family, which Elaine and Feyre wonder, should we help her? And Feyre says, quote, yes, but not today, not tomorrow, when she's ready. We see how that goes. All the mentions of the queens and how they will still be a problem. Yes, one in particular will still be a problem.
Lucien will indeed come to Valaris. He will get an elegant apartment by the river in Valaris, which he spends very little time in actually, though, because he's mostly chilling with his band of exiles in the human realm. Elaine believes that the world needs more gardens. And yes, she will begin helping create gardens for others in Valaris. I just love that so much.
This one's more speculative, but it's mentioned about how Amren, with being High Fae now, they wonder if she has some new hidden powers. I don't think so. Has this come up in Silver Flames?
Not to my knowledge.
We will be on the lookout for that. It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will sit back with the Suriel, sip some tea, and walk us through a world building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it. Let's just do the biggest piece of this world today, shall we?
Today's Suriel topic is part 2 of the Cauldron, where we're focusing on its powers. We previously did the Cauldron part 1 for the ACOWAR episode 11 Suriel, and we discussed what the Cauldron is at a high level and its ability to turn humans fae. So if I seem like I'm skimming over things here, it's because we already talked about it, and you can watch that Suriel segment as its own YouTube video linked in the show notes. All right, as we know, the Cauldron is an extremely powerful and ancient magical artifact. According to the Fae, it is the source of all life. The world was born from the Cauldron, and it holds everyone's fate. I personally believe the Cauldron symbolically holds everyone's fate as the source of life versus the physical Cauldron, literally containing and dishing out people's fates, if that makes any sense at all. Without the Cauldron, all life ceases to exist. But why is this? Well, we have an answer, but it does involve me pulling information from somewhere else in the Maasverse. Legend may say that the mother held the Cauldron and poured its contents out to create the world. But we learn that this world actually existed before the Cauldron with the ancient Fae who worshipped the old gods, the death gods, as we've talked about a lot. It was the High Fae who brought the mother and Cauldron as deities into this world. After the Daglin arrived in Prythian, they gained access to the Cauldron and they corrupted it. The Daglin did this by amplifying their power thanks to the gifts of this land. And when I say gifts of this land, the land is inherently magic. So these gifts of the land are literally like the magic of the land. Then the Daglin pooled their power and imbued these gifts of the land into the Cauldron so they could control the Cauldron. By imbuing the land's gifts into the Cauldron with their power, the Daglin bound the very essence of the Cauldron to the soul of this world. So when they did this, they essentially created what we would consider a kill switch. There's more to it, but I'll stop there before I get into spoiler territory. However, this does solve the mystery of why the Cauldron wasn't originally of this world, yet the world is still tied to it. We've known that it's not supposed to be possible to destroy the Cauldron. So I'm really leaning toward Amren's otherworldly power is what caused it to destroy. And it's more like no one of this world can destroy it. Because remember, those Daglin aren't of this world and neither is Amren. They're far, far more powerful. Now, I do have to wonder if Feyre fixing the Cauldron and representing the mother from the Spring Court mural makes it go back to its original uncorrupted state. Maybe? Something to keep an eye on for the rest of the series. When the Cauldron is destroyed from Amren becoming unbound or also unbinding the Cauldron from the same spell, they, for lack of a better word, activate the kill switch of this world. And this darkness that goes into the void, a black hole of the universe, will swallow up the entire world and everyone will cease to exist. But let's get into the Cauldron's power. The Cauldron is at its full power when its 3 feet are attached to it. Never forget the Cauldron's feet. Of course, I have to include that in the Suriel. Breathings was forged using the last of the molten ore used to forge the Cauldron, and it contains spells to nullify the Cauldron's power or to control it wholly. However, the Book of Breathings is not necessary to wield the power of the Cauldron. It essentially serves as a spell book to guide someone to use it accordingly and at its full potential. At least that's how I understand it. Let's talk about that nullification. You can only nullify the Cauldron when you put the 2 halves of the Book of Breathings together, touch the Cauldron, and then speak the spell from the book. Remember that in order to wield the Book of breathings, you must be made. So theoretically, only a made individual can learn the Book of Breathing spell that can then nullify the cauldron. Nullifying the cauldron is very dangerous though, and comes at a terrible cost. The cauldron drains you of your life in order to be successfully nullified. The cauldron can take life and it can give life. There truly doesn't seem to be known limits to its power. It is power and energy in the simplest terms. It is simultaneously opposites, where these opposites coexist because it is both all and nothing. I honestly don't know how else to describe it because it is such an all-powerful concept. Again, part 1 does include a little bit more regarding all of this. You can easily lose yourself when you hold on to the cauldron. You become intertwined with it because it is so overwhelmingly powerful. Have I mentioned that yet? Its spirit can whisk you away while the cauldron might be stationary, like how it lured Elaine away from the Prithian camp or took Thera across the battlefield. Like we've talked about on the podcast, the cauldron sort of has a conscience, although Thera says otherwise. I'm going to go with this because I have proof. For instance, it likes Elaine and it purrs in her presence, but it does not like Nesta and thinks that she's a thief for stealing some of its power. Known cauldron powers include, like I mentioned, there really is no limit to the cauldron's powers, but we have seen the following powers from the cauldron. For instance, it can raise the dead as long as their soul is somehow preserved or contained, like as an eye in a ring or a piece of bone. I assume that there's a spell associated with that. I don't know exactly. And then also there's the fact that Jurian couldn't resurrect Miriam because she was not dead, but I'm guessing that he didn't have a piece of her soul, so I'm not entirely sure how the nuances of that work. Anyway, the cauldron can also turn mortals into fae, as we discussed in our Cauldron Part 1 Suriel. The cauldron can create wicked creatures as the Daglin used it for. It can create special weapons that can, for example, kill immortals. It can shatter powerful wards and spells, and even the magical wall separating the fae and human realms. The cauldron can shoot targeted blasts and turn living beings into ash, as the Illyrians and Bonecarver unfortunately learned. And the cauldron can create illusions, like how it conjured Grayson for Elaine to go after. Remember how Thera dreamed it? So it also might be like projected into Elaine's mind versus a physical illusion where someone else would see it. Again, we don't fully know how that works. The cauldron, of course, has the power of death, which Nesta takes some of that power. Exactly what that means, I still don't know, but we will explore that more in Silver Flames. Lastly, it can also gift others power, like being a seer. And I do wonder, maybe that's linked to its concept of fate. Like any magic, though, the cauldron's power can be depleted. After it exerts a lot of power, it needs to rest and gather some strength. Or it isn't at full power to be used to its greatest potential because a certain Archeron sister took some of its power, though that doesn't stop it from still being able to shatter the wall, albeit a little help from the holes, or kill a death god in a single blow. I would be terrified to see what the cauldron truly was at full power. And that, friends, is our Suriel Teatime on the Cauldron Part 2. I really feel like there's still so much information about the cauldron, and I won't say that this is one of my favorite Suriels because I just feel like so much is missing, but I'll leave it at that for now.
I think you did a really great job. That is very hard. All right, friends, let's close out this ACOWAR only part of this episode with our Fae-vorite Moments. When Fae-vorite is frantically wondering what to do about, the end of the world, she hurls Bob into the void of the cauldron without warning, and Reese says, quote, "Well, that's one way to try." This completely makes me cackle. Also, bye-bye, Bob. That's the last time we'll see you.
Reese's reaction to everyone Wait!
Yes?
Oh my gosh, I just had a Maasverse thing come up.
Yes! Oh my god!
Okay, moving on. Nesta spitting on the King of Hybern's corpse because, it's not enough to decapitate him. I love that little nugget. It's such a Nesta thing to do.
At the end of the meeting, Feyre looks at Lucien and Vassa talking. Lucien's shoulders are loose and he's laughing. And he's listening intently to Vassa.
I'm shipping them so much.
I honestly am too. I really think he's at ease with her. I'm like, we just never see him like this. Also, it is at Jurian's reassurance that Feyre needed to know that peace will be achievable eventually. I just love that it's our dude Jurian that finally eases that anxiety. We love you, Jurian. We stand for you. Elaine's got jokes. Quote, "The new Amren is even crankier than the old one." I love this because this is also just show don't tell on how much she is fitting in with the family and starting to feel like one of them. I'm not going to say fitting in with the Night Court, but fitting in within the family. She's letting her own personality show through that soft-spoken exterior. I'm so excited for her.
Cassian declares that they're opening the fancy bottles upon their return to Valaris. And honestly, I do the exact same. After everything they've been through, they deserve to drink the best of the best.
Absolutely.
Rhys reflects on the vision of the future Farah has shown him, which she thought of back at the cabin before the iconic Chapter 54. Quote, a dream still unanswered, but not forever. They have such an incredible future ahead of them with her painting and a baby and a happy family in life.
And of course, my favorite callback of all time. Farah finally went to the Lacy Under Things store, everyone. She was gifted that red set that she had eyed up and down thrice back in ACOWAR. And yes, indeed, this is the infamous red set that Rhys sent into her mind right before she ran into a wall. One of my favorite scenes in the entire series.
All right, friends, we are about to begin our Maasverse Madness section. Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for the Crescent City series. So if you have not read those 3 books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode, we will be covering A Court of Frost and Starlight, chapters 1 through 14.
That's the longest chapter stretch we've ever done. Before we part ways, though, we want to give a huge shout out to the newest members of our Inner Circle. That is Emma T, Dylan, Victoria, Mackenzie M, Katie S, Madison M, Stephanie K, Anna C, and Samantha W. Thank you so much for being part of the Inner Circle.
We appreciate you so much. And hey, if you're like, wait a second, I want my name shouted out on the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and be showered with love too, go ahead, go check out our Patreon. We'd love to have you join the party.
We also have new merch, and we actually just launched a collaboration with Sparrow and Wild for some Fantasy Fangirls temporary tattoos. All of our merch, including the new temporary tattoo collab, is in the show notes.
And of course, if you are not following us on Instagram and TikTok, go ahead and give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Last thing before we get into Maasverse Madness, and you know what I'm going to say, that is rate and review the podcast. It takes 2 seconds to hit that 5-star button, to write a little love note in the review section. And as I always say, please don't just do this for Fantasy Fangirls. Do this for any podcast you listen to. It's one of the best things you can do to help others find the show.
All right, we are now officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from Crescent City, so please only continue listening if you've read all 3 Crescent City books.
Let's talk about Amren. She mentions how she first thought her arrival in Prythian was some sort of punishment for disobeying her father's orders. She thinks, quote, I thought this world was some hell he'd locked me into. Hell, you say? It's almost like Bryce Quinlan, in search of going to hell, ended up in Prythian instead. There are so many theories around hell being Prythian, or Prythian being connected to hell, or some level of hell, or the library is the hell. There's so many different theories, but I will poke a hole in this. But we do know from Adis in House of Earth and Blood that hell is its own planet. And I don't think it is the same planet as Prythian, mainly because Adis says in that same sentence that, quote, the Fae, the Shifters, and many others came from their own worlds, inferring that they are different from the worlds of Midgard and Hell. However, Adis does mention how the Malachim were made by the Asteri. Malachim is Hebrew for angel or messenger. What does Amren call herself earlier in this book? A messenger. We know from SJM that she is basically an angel of death-like character. However, I mentioned earlier that Amren's saying father is a stand-in for God, per that SJM interview. But I also wonder if it could be a stand-in for the Asteri. Was Amren's kind one of the, I'll call it, first versions of the Malachim? I'm assuming they were too powerful, especially given that the parasite water over time, made power diminish. So I'm looking more at like Isaiah or like people like that at that level. Paulus, stuff like that, they would have their powers diminish over time. This would be, however, a Asteri committing a nicety, because the father was very okay with Amren yeeting off that planet. The other thing I want to note here is that the Cauldron, as it's, breaking the world as we know it, Feyre thinks, quote, it was a hole, airless. No life could exist here. No light. This sounds a whole lot like where the Asteri went at the end of House of Flame and Shadow. Is this the same black hole? Yes, absolutely. This is I don't think that this is just a coincidence. A small thing that I honestly think is actually just a coincidence. Right after mentioning the void, Feyre thinks, quote, an unending lightning strike that surged from me into this place. It's just that fun little like lightning. And then I'm immediately thinking of Hun. I'm sure it's a coincidence, but I was like, oh, that's fun.
Well, and then what we were just talking about with the black hole and the Bob getting thrown into it. If that is the same black hole, it is literally off somewhere in the black holeness of the universe. And we know that the Book of Breathings ends up in Jessica's library.
Yes.
And nobody knows how.
Like, that's probably how.
Well, at least we know step one, and then we don't know how the heck it gets from the black hole to the library. But at least there's that.
Yeah, that part's lost on me. But we got at least step one.
I do want to continue our conversation from the Suriel because I was really tiptoeing around some spoilers there. The Daglan, aka the Asteri, made the Cauldron this world's kill switch to protect their interests as the overrulers of the world. They make kill switches in every world that they go into and they take over. Like in Midgard, it's the First Light core room, which, yes, when Bryce blasts Godslayer rifle into the First Light core and activates the kill switch, quote, a darkness like none you have ever known shall devour this planet and you will all cease to exist.
Black hole!
I love when that happens. Yes.
All right, friends, that is it for ACOWAR. Goodbye.
Well, this was so much fun to deep dive, and I'm also very excited to move into the next chapter of this series. Get how I did that.
The next 14 chapters of this series.
Speaking of, next Monday, we are going straight into Frost and Starlight with chapters 1 through 14. Just a quick note that it is going to be slightly different formatting than we usually do here because it's a little bit more of a thematic approach versus like our chapter by chapter deep dives that we've been doing.
Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We freaking love ya. And of course, as always, share this episode with your fellow ACOTAR friends. If you also were up in arms about all the dying and then the coming back to life and you need someone to explain why this is on the page, we got you. And we got your friends too. So please be sure to share this episode with them.
And with that, friends, we will see you next week with a new book.
It is time for the holiday season. In October. Bye. It's September. Oh my God.
So Rhys, on his last bit of power, gives her more of his power. How many times am I going to say the word power? All of his power that he has in him so she can be this. Oh my God, I need to change this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is 2 sentences and you said it 5 times. That's amazing.